I beat Mega Man 6 in one sitting without taking a hit. This video is going to cover the rules, the route for playing the game, how the attempts for the run went, and a review of the run that made it all the way. This video is a summary of the run. You can find the full run in the video description below. The rules for this run are as follows. First and foremost, this must be performed by a real person in one sitting. Some runs out there are what is called tool assisted, effectively meaning scripted inputs and gameplay from a computer. This was played by me on a real Famicom that allows NES games to be played on it. No deaths, damage, or getting hit of any kind is allowed. No glitches that allow skipping content are permitted. Mega Man 6 does not have any major known skips like this to date, so this wasn't much of a concern. Pressing pause is naturally allowed, as this is how the player changes weapons. However, a good faith rule is put in place to disallow pressing pause to pause buffer enemy actions. Generally, it is okay to press pause to change weapons as part of strategy. This isn't a hard and fast rule and is hard to enforce, but the overall goal is to have a clean run that doesn't rely upon cheaply using pause buffering techniques to navigate the hard and stressful parts of the game. In summary, the point of the challenge is to have the player beat the game with their skills and reactions without any unnecessary shortcuts. Before talking about the route, let's discuss Mega Man 6 as a whole. First off, playing on the Western release version or Japanese version does not make a difference. This game is also on Mega Man Legacy Collection, and is the same game as the original for all intents and purposes. This run was performed on its US release version. Mega Man 6 is the last entry in the NES series. It has a small number of engine changes that make it noticeably different than its predecessors. The two main differences worth discussing briefly are as follows. First, in most Mega Man games before and after this game, while Mega Man is sliding, he can jump out of a slide at any time. However, in Mega Man 6, Mega Man must come to a complete stop before jumping out of a slide. Second, in Mega Man 6, when Mega Man is either moving or landing and comes to a complete stop between moving directions, any input that takes place on the same exact frame that he lands causes the input to become nullified. In other words, the player must keep a consistent flow to movement in order to ensure that inputs do not get dropped. There are some other Mega Man games with similar mechanics, but it is a very prominent part of moving around in this game. These two things cause Mega Man 6 to need to be played in a very specific way. Some players get frustrated when playing this game because of the above two mechanics and a few other minor things, but if a player can learn how to play this game, it is quite fun. The first step for routing is how to approach the first 8 Robot Masters, which are freely available to choose from in any order before entering the final 8 castle stages. There are multiple considerations, but in general the goal is to choose a route that knocks out the hardest parts first, if possible, so that the player can reset the games if things go wrong and try again as quickly as possible. Another consideration is to choose a route that gets the most synergy out of weapons and the jet and power suits. The jet suit is retrieved after defeating Plant Man, and the power suit is retrieved after defeating Flame Man. The first Robot Master to discuss is Tomahawk Man. Tomahawk Man is the most difficult Robot Master to fight without taking damage. The main reason is that his weakness is Plant Barrier, which requires being directly next to Tomahawk Man in order to land hits, which heavily risks Mega Man taking damage. His patterns involve 2 different ground attacks and a variety of different jump arcs. In Mega Man 6, with the exception of Nightman, all Robot Masters will not do the exact same action more than twice in a row, but they can mix and match however they like. Because of this, Tomahawk Man is not at all feasible to fight with his weakness in close quarters. This means he is fought with Mega Buster at a distance, which immediately makes him a good candidate for being the first Robot Master to take down. His stage is also feasible to complete with the Mega Buster only, too. Additional considerations for the route is which stages are generally hardest and which ones heavily benefit from Robot Master weapons. The final screen of Flame Man has Fire Boys that have variable attack patterns and some strange lag considerations to deal with in the stage. Plant Man features the mini-boss Gorilla Tank twice, which heavily benefits from getting strong weapons to take out, and its own final screen is difficult too. Yamato Man's stage benefits from having Jet Suit. Some Robot Masters have larger enemies such as the Squid-On found in numerous stages, that can be fought with Mega Buster but are much more efficiently fought with stronger weapons. On the flip side, some stages are easier, notably Nightman's stage not having a mini-boss and being clearable with the Mega Buster only. Another brief consideration is to collect Beat's letters to retrieve him as a weapon, or to get the weapon energy balancer from Proto Man in Tomahawk stage. Neither of these are of major value and are skipped. There is generally no reason to deviate from the chain of stages from Wind Man through Plant Man, which goes Wind Man, Flame Man, Blizzard Man, and Plant Man. This follows the Robot Master's weaknesses after fighting Wind Man with the Mega Buster, and also gives the player both jet and power suits. Tomahawk Man can be fought after Plant Man, which would follow the weakness order entirely, but because the Tomahawk Man fight doesn't use Plant Barrier, there's no value in putting this difficult battle off until later in the run. With Tomahawk Man somewhere in the first few stages, and Wind Man through Plant Man being static, the order that I chose was Tomahawk, Wind, Flame, Blizzard, Plant, Yamato, Knight, then Centaur. When I first started this challenge for this game, I started with Wind Man and followed weakness order, where Tomahawk Man was 5th. I later changed Tomahawk Man to be 1st, which let me both knock out Tomahawk Man with Mega Buster, then benefit from having his weapon, the Silver Tomahawk, for the Wind Man and Blizzard Man stages in particular. It's worth noting that the other early game routes that fight Knight Man and possibly Centaur Man within the first few stages are perfectly reasonable, but it's mostly a matter of preference. After entering the castle stages, there are no longer any decisions about which stages to tackle in which order, but the focus shifts on how to use weapon energy. Weapon energy is not restored between stages and must be managed while in the castle stages. This will be covered in the walkthrough of the run, but generally the weapon energy routing in this game is quite lenient. Now it's time to discuss all the attempts that didn't quite make it all the way, and finally the run that did. Unsurprisingly, I gradually became more consistent at playing this game as time went on. It took quite a bit of time to adjust to the aforementioned Mega Man 6 specific mechanics. Early on, I was taking a lot of extra hits because of nullified inputs, but I gradually adjusted my movement to avoid these problems. I'll call out common reset points as we review the run that made it, but there are numerous difficult parts of the game for avoiding damage. Let's review the successful run. Starting in Tomahawk Man stage, the mini-boss Metal Paton is fought twice with Mega Buster, and the rest of the stage is quite manageable with Mega Buster only. Tomahawk Man is a difficult fight, but fighting him right away is nice. However, he will be refought at the very end of the game, which is a very stressful part. As mentioned before, Tomahawk Man has a variety of attacks and jump patterns, so keeping distance and generally preemptively reacting to his attacks before they come out is a winning strategy. In this entire series, it becomes critical to master how each Robot Master decides to take their actions and to foresee the possibilities in advance. Next is Wind Man, who gets some usage from the Silver Tomahawk weapon. The 4th screen featuring cannon pellers and cyber gabioles can be tricky, but with some good alignment and patience, it is a consistently clearable screen. Wind Man is fought with Mega Buster, which is a perfectly reasonable fight. Flame Man comes after. The stage is mostly reasonable, but the Fire Telly enemies can be somewhat difficult to pinpoint. After hitting a Fire Telly once, they have a chance of moving diagonally, which can quickly get out of control. The final screen of Flame Man features a jump over a Cyber Gabiole to defeat a Fire Boy. The Fire Boy can take its action either immediately or wait a bit, and if it fires immediately, it is quite unlikely to make it through unscathed. This goes well in the run. Flame Man's fight requires careful positioning around his flame pillars. The combination of his 3x fireball pattern into flame pillars is quite dangerous, but with practice and good positioning, his fight is reasonable. Blizzard Man is the next stage. The Windstorm, Silver Tomahawk, and Flame Blast weapons all get use. It is worth noting that Flame Blast is an incredible weapon, dealing 4 damage per shot and having some persistent effects with its pillars. There are 2 Squid-On mini-bosses that benefit from having sub-weapons to deal with. Blizzard Man himself is a careful positioning game to avoid his own Blizzard attack, which tracks your movement. It's important to stay somewhere between the wall and Blizzard Man when this comes out, to give Mega Man room to dodge either way. Up next is Plant Man. Windstorm gets some usage early on, then Mega Buster and Flame Blast are used for the rest of the stage. 2 Gorilla Tank mini-bosses go down to Flame Blast. The Grasshopper enemies, Batabaton, are deceptively difficult and ruin multiple attempts of mine. Do not believe their lies. The final screen is a chaotic screen, but with patience and good understanding of enemy placement, it is cleared. Plantman himself will spawn Plant Barrier, jump either towards or away from Mega Man, then walk to where Mega Man is currently standing as of the time of Plantman deciding to walk. It's a generally easy fight, but Mega Man 6's Robot Masters are noticeably bigger than most other Robot Masters on the NES, so it's necessary to have good spacing. Plantman goes down to Blizzard Attack and we move on. With Tomahawk Man already down, the next in the weakness order is Yamato Man. Flame Blast clears the early parts of the stage easily. That being said, during the run I had a very close encounter with the Shigaraki enemy on the first screen, but I managed to avoid disaster. As mentioned before, Jet Suit gets usage here to traverse the upper path. Yamato Man himself is one of the harder Robot Masters and probably the one I spent the most time practicing. When not carefully controlled, his jumps can be very chaotic, and his aerial spear can be very dangerous if it is not baited correctly. The general strategy is to stay under him while he jumps in the air so that his attack goes straight down, then to dodge. His other attack is to throw his spear and pick it up, which is a fast attack but favorable. An interesting part of fighting Yamato Man is that his recovery to do his next action depends on his previous action. If he throws his spear and picks it up, he will do his next action very quickly, but if he jumps, the next action comparatively comes out slower. Mastering this timing is how I learned to clear this fight efficiently. Nightman is the next stage and is quite simple. That being said, multiple of my runs died to the obnoxious brown enemy, where the route uses Yamato Spear to clear them out. Yamato Spear has 3 different arcs, and sometimes brown don't get hit well and block your progress in strange ways. Otherwise, there is no mini-boss in this stage. Blizzard Attack gets rare use at the end of the stage to take out the Cyber Gabioles for safety, then Nightman is fought. Nightman is the only Robot Master that does not adhere to the rule of only possibly doing the same action twice in a row. In other words, he's completely random, but he's mostly manageable. His worst patterns is when he consistently walks towards Mega Man, since it is very hard to jump over him. A reasonable strategy is to switch to Jet Suit to fly over him if he starts doing this, but mostly he is fought efficiently with Yamato Spear. The final Robot Master stage is Centaur Man. Centaur Man's stage became a headache for me and I frequently reset here. I think it was partially a mental blockade of finishing the Robot Master stages and earning a chance at the castle stages. The first screen is challenging with the SRU-21P and Pelicanu enemies. Silver Tomahawk gets use in the whole stage, Puka enemies must be taken out with Mega Buster or Power Suit, then Night Crusher rounds out the rest of the stage. Centaur Man himself is mildly dangerous. His patterns are very reactable, but he is a very large Robot Master and jumping over him is sometimes required and is often difficult to do. If Centaur Man is not fought appropriately, he can freeze time and put the player at significant risk of damage, but careful play usually avoids this. On to the castle stages. As mentioned before, weapon energy will not be restored between stages. The first 4 stages are called the X stages, named X1, X2, X3, and X4. X1 is a very simple stage. Use Power Suit at the beginning, then navigate carefully with Jet Suit after. The shortcut is taken, and Mega Buster clears the Bata-Batan enemies. Rounder 2 is the boss, and is not a problematic fight when well rehearsed. There were some fights that I never lost a run to, and this was one of them. X2 is a noticeably more challenging stage. The Met enemies have their classic defense pattern, which makes for a slow and scary stage. The Mega Man 6 mechanics of moving around carefully to avoid nullifying inputs is very important here. It is easy to get caught moving the wrong way and get sniped by a Met. The boss fight, Power Piston, is the absolute worst fight. Thankfully, the very leftmost part of the screen is safe from the falling boulders, but the rest of the fight is hoping that the boss randomly stays high on the screen so that Silver Tomahawk can hit. Power Piston shoots either 2 or 3 bullets routinely, and their angles change heavily and are not foreseeable, but they are generally reactable. It's worth noting that Plant Barrier can nullify a good number of the boss attacks in general in this game, which includes both the boulders and regular projectiles from Power Piston. In the run here, Power Piston mostly cooperates, but many runs ended to this fight. X3 is perhaps the most stressful stage itself. It requires heavy use of jet suit and takes a lot of practice. The stage features a difficult combination of Pooker and Fire Telly enemies, which force the player to weave around platforms to take them out. Mega Buster is swapped to frequently to disable the Pookers, but jet suit gets most usage. The boss of X3 is Matongar Z. At first I underestimated this boss. It moves in mysterious ways sometimes. The main thing to respect about Matongar Z is that as soon as a projectile clears the screen entirely and the next attack is over, it can go immediately into its next attack. Respecting where the boss is and how it can possibly hit you is how you learn to gradually dish out attacks without risk of getting hit. It has two different projectile attacks, and I learned to jump in between its faster straight bullet attack to less risk taking damage between turns. X4 is a challenging stage as well, but a slight difficulty decrease. I changed my strategy for using weapons in the stage quite a bit, but the final version used Night Crusher early on, then swaps to Yamato Spear to take out the Colton enemies, then performs the final screen with Centaur Flash. Centaur Flash is a full screen nuke that does 4 damage, which in particular is very useful for this final screen. During practice there were many times where I tried clearing this screen with less ammo usage, but it would always occasionally end in disaster. The weapon routing worked out just fine with using Centaur Flash heavily here. The boss, however, is one of the harder bosses, X Crusher. It requires Power Suit to juggle the boss back and forth. Actually juggling the boss is not hard, but dodging the variable timing on the ground projectile attack is scary, especially when on a damageless run up until this point. Onto the Wily stages. Both Wily 1 and Wily 2 are noticeably easier stages than X2 through X4. However, Wily 1's first screen requires precision and patience. Both Mets and Fire Tellys block the way, but taking the enemies one at a time and being careful not to lose any inputs, it is consistently clearable. The side route in the stage is taken to refill some weapon energy. The rest of the stage is cleared with Jet Suit and Flame Blast. Off to the boss, Mechasaurus. Mechasaurus could have easily been the most difficult and dangerous fight, but thanks to a nice alternate solution, it is the easiest. By switching to Power Suit and punching its platforms back to its body, it takes 1 damage at a time, and the fight is perfectly safe in the position shown here. Mechasaurus otherwise has to be fought with Yamato Spear and is extraordinarily dangerous for taking a hit, but it does go down easily here. Wily 2 is a very simple, short stage. On the first screen, the player must be very careful of watching for enemy drops. If an enemy drops anything and Mega Man slides under an enemy while picking up the drop, for whatever reason in this game they can possibly take damage. Flame Blast and Power Suit clean up the stage until the last screen, which is cleared carefully with Windstorm. Tank CS2 is the boss, which is a straightforward fight. However, in this attempt I almost got hit, which was, without exaggeration, a first in all of my attempts. It wasn't my nervousness or anything, I just messed up one of the shots and had to play it safe. The second ball projectile almost got me, but thankfully I survived. Wily 3 starts with a small platforming section, which is mostly safe and allows the player to refill any necessary weapon energy. Then it's on to the refights, which in my opinion is easily the hardest part of the run and probably will be one of the hardest parts for any classic Mega Man game challenge like this. 8 Robot Master fights, all back to back. Tomahawk Man is first due to his difficulty, then the fights are simply fought in counterclockwise order. These refights mostly went well, but there routinely were close calls, notably Plant Man and Centaur Man. After taking out Windman, it's time for the final stage. Wily 4 has a short stage, then the final boss. Silver Tomahawk is used for the mini-boss and all of the final boss, so it is imperative for it to be mostly full on ammo. In the grand scheme of the run, the final boss is relatively easy. However, it does require a lot of practice and careful movement, and no matter what, being on a damageless run up until this point is difficult on your nerves. During this night of attempts, before getting this successful run, I had a run make it all the way here, just to have it end in this fight due to one of my inputs being nullified due to my movement. Thankfully, I made it back in the same night. Wily Machine has 2 phases, then Wily Capsule appears. Silver Tomahawk does 4 damage throughout the fight, and all of Wily machine goes down relatively easily with good positioning and properly timed attacks. The second machine can have variable distance it jumps, so the player has to react quickly to avoid getting crushed. Wily Capsule can spawn in many locations, but there are numerous safe spots to stand. The general idea is that Capsule's projectiles spawn only in the 4 cardinal directions, so generally positioning Mega Man to be diagonal of these to stand before the attacks come out is favorable. I did not use it during this final run, but Plant Barrier can get usage to shield against all of this final boss's projectile attacks. After playing safely and attacking opportunely, Capsule goes down and the fight is won. Mega Man 6 was the second game in the classic Mega Man series I beat without taking damage. As I mentioned many times, even with a lot of prior Mega Man experience, I had to learn specifically how to play Mega Man 6 and to respect its intricacies in order to survive the challenge. The fact that Robot Masters are physically larger and taller than others on the NES, and the wide variety of patterns they can unleash makes this game challenging. I feel that the difficulty is well distributed in this game for this challenge, with easier parts and harder parts nicely balanced. I had a great time with this one and I'm looking forward to the next. Thank you for watching. If you like this video and the style of this content, please consider subscribing to the channel and let me know your feedback in the comments. See you for the next one.